Hello, my name is Carrie Thorne and this is Jamie Bedford, and today we're going to be interviewing Marion Belyea here at the Cambridge Narrows Regional Library. Today is October 21st, 2010. Let's go inside and listen to Miss Belyea's stories. Miss Belyea, we would like to thank you for taking the opportunity to share your life with us. I understand that you were born in 1926 and that you have lived your whole life in Cambridge. So, living in the early 20s with no electricity or water, what was it like growing up as a teen and not having the things we have today?
As I remember, we had a lot of fun when we were in our teens. We, as I said before, we didn't have any TV, or I think we did have a telephone, but we could just talk to one or two neighbors on that. So we weren't on the phone talking to our friends all the time. But we skated and swam and just did a lot of outdoor things. We weren't for staying inside because there wasn't very much to do in the house anyway. So we just played in the woods and down at the shore, and even in my early teens that was, because when I finished school I went to St. John to go to work when I was 16. So we had a lot of fun, as I remember it. We didn't feel any need for anything else.
Before you went to St. John and did your work, what was your first job?
My first job was picking strawberries. We got paid for picking strawberries. We got paid cent and a half a box for picking the strawberries. And we started when we were quite young. But in my teens, we still picked berries. That was on our own farm. Sometimes we picked for other people once in a while, but we had to weed and things like that. But we didn't get paid for weeding. We got paid for picking the berries. Sometimes we got paid a little bit for picking beans or peas, and that was the only work that I did in my teens before I went to St. John.
Okay. Did you have a lot of chores around home to do?
Oh yes. My sister and I had to, before we went to school in the morning, we had to wash the breakfast dishes, and we had to wash the separator, which you don't know what a separator is. It was, we had cows, we milked cows, you see, and the milk we brought into this separator that they called it. It was you turned a crank to run it. You put the milk in the bowl, and you turned the crank, and you got it going fast, and you turned the tap so the milk went down through the workings of the thing. There were two spouts. One spout came out skim milk. The other spout came out cream. And we took the object was to get the cream, and we sold that. There was a truck came every week, I think, and picked up the cream and took it to Sussex or where they made it into butter and cheese and whatnot.
How did you heat your home when you had no electricity?
Wood. We had the wood kitchen stove. That was the main heat in the kitchen. We did have a wood furnace. My mother put a little fire on the furnace late in the afternoon so that it would be a little bit warm upstairs when we went to bed, but there was only one furnace grate upstairs, so we didn't get much heat upstairs, but we had lots of heavy quilts over us, so we're never cold.
How many people were in your family when you were growing up?
I had a brother and a sister, and of course my mother and father.
What did your parents do for work?
Well, my father, of course, farmed all summer, and then the winter he went in the woods and he cut the firewood and hauled that out. And then he would go and cut maybe some logs and haul them out. Maybe, I don't remember him cutting much pulpwood, but he cut a few logs each winter. He'd get the money from the logs to buy seeds and things to plant the garden in the spring.
Okay.
And some winters he'd go away and be away all week, working in the lumber camp, and just be home Saturday night. And he'd bring us each a chew of bubble gum. That was our treat.
How did you and your family get around if you had to go somewhere?
Horse and carriage, horse and sleigh in the wintertime.
Okay.
That was about it when I was little. We did have my father had an old Model T Ford when we were just small. But then in the Depression times, in the 30s, they couldn't afford to run it. And in the wintertime, you couldn't anyway because no roads were plowed. But my mother used to drive it. It had 3 or 4 pedals, and I don't know how she did it. Every pedal did something different. And she used to take us kids in the car, and she was brought up down McDonald's Point, the other side of the lake. And she used to take us down in the old car to visit my grandparents down there.
Where did you go to school at?
Well, it was a one-room school down here where the municipal building is. The old building is down in at Robina Weatherly's. You've seen it maybe, yeah. That's where I went to school up until I finished grade 11.
So they had from grade 1 to 11 in that school?
At that time, yes.
Okay.
Ordinarily, it was just from 1 to 8, possibly 9. But the teacher we had agreed to teach 4 of us, grade 10 and 11. So.
How did you get to school every morning?
On my feet. We walked. We had to walk close to a mile. So we had to take our lunches with us.
Did you enjoy going to school?
Oh yes, I liked school. I always liked school.
Have you ever had a pet?
Oh, we had dogs. We had a real nice dog when we were really little. He just came to us. He came off the boat. My father was up to the wharf to pick up some feed or something from the boat, and they put this dog off. I guess nobody knew. There was no tag on it. Nobody knew who it was or anything. So he followed my father home, and we had him ever after. He was kind of a big Airedale dog. Nice dog. We had cats to no end.
What was the fashion like?
Fashion, I don't think we knew what the word meant. We just wore what we could get on. We had, of course, the girls at those times didn't wear pants of any kind. We had to wear dresses. And, of course, we wore, heavy clothing. The dresses were quite heavy cloth. My mother used to knit stockings that would come up, clear up over our knees. So that's what we wore then, when we were little.
Is there any highlights of your life that you want to share with us, or anything that meant a lot to you?
One of my highlights was moving from after I graduated from school, and I went to St. John to work when I was 16, and I hadn't hardly been away from home, you might say, before that. So it was quite a move. I boarded with relatives down there and went to work. I worked at various things, off and on for 8 years, and that was a highlight. But the second highlight was when I moved back home, and I married a man from the Narrows, and moved back into the country life. And then, of course, other highlights were when my children were born. I had 6 of them.
That's a lot of kids.
6 kids.
You shared that you had 6 children. Can you share a little about what your family life was like when your first child was born in 1951?
In 1951, we bought an old house on the other side of the lake. It was basic. The upstairs wasn't usable. We basically had 2 rooms. We didn't even have electricity there, so we had no running water. We had no electricity. We had no telephone. I did have a radio, which is one of my favorite things. And when Susan was my first child, she was born, we had to go to Sussex to the hospital. So that was a little bit harrowing, but we made it always. And so, we had to feed her and wash the diapers by hand, the old scrub board thing, hang them out to dry. But we managed. She grew and thrived. Then in 1952, our second girl was born, Carol. She was born in December, first day of December, so it was getting on to winter then, but we still had to go to Sussex for her to be born. Everyone had the flu in the hospital at the time, so they sent us. She was quite tiny. She was just barely 5 pounds. And they sent us home early because they were afraid of the flu for the baby and for me. We still had no hydro. The hydro didn't go down that road. It went as far as the place above us, but then it stopped. So she was a year or 2 old before we got the hydro. And then, of course, we got a well drilled and had a pump, and so we had a little bit of running water, which made it better. Then in 1955, our third girl was born, Linda. She was born in October. Her birthday was just last Sunday. And by then we had, as I said, we had the electricity, so things were a little bit better. But it was getting a bit crowded in the 2 rooms. We had a big bedroom, but even so, it was a little bit crowded. But the next year, we bought the place that I live in now, just directly across the lake from where we were. So we moved in the spring of 1957, in April, to our immense mansion, it seemed to us then, because it had 4 bedrooms upstairs and 4 or 5 rooms downstairs, and we didn't have much furniture to furnish it with, but we got odds and ends, and made do as people did back then. And then that fall, our 4th girl, Patty, was born, again in October. And so things went along, we scraped along, we had chickens. My husband raised chickens and sold them, and did a little butchering and some farming and some woodwork, and so we got along all right. And then in 1958, the spring of 1958, we took in one of my husband's nephews, Harold Simpson. He lives out the road there. And he was 12 years old. So we had him. His family had broken up, and his mother couldn't keep him, so we took him in. So at that time, you see, we had the 4 girls. And then it wasn't long before Tom was born, my son, finally. I thought, before he was born, I thought, oh yeah, another girl. So it was a big surprise when he was born, found he was a boy. So that was in 1960, when Tom was born. So, and then we had Harold, and we had the 4 girls, and then we had Tom. And so we finally filled the old house up pretty well. But it was hard, you know, there wasn't a whole lot of money to spend for clothes and things, and the kids are getting bigger and wanting more, and when they go to school they have to have this and they have to have that, and you have to scrape for your money. But one of the best things that they did back, well, quite early, I think, I can't remember just when it started, shortly after Susan was born, I think there was some family allowance. It was a big help for the women, because the check came to the mother and it didn't go to the father, which sadly in some cases they, you know, sort of would squander it maybe. So the mothers had that, and that was a great, wonderful thing for her. And the Medicare came in too, because when I first went to the hospital for the babies, we had to pay for everything. But then when that came in, that was eased us quite a bit too. So I've got Tom, and then in 1963 Anna was born, and that another girl, and I said that's it. No more girls. I always said I'd rather raise 4 or 5 boys than one girl. But it just worked that way, I think. They were pretty good kids. We didn't have a lot of trouble. But with a house full of teenagers, you know, sometimes there were problems, but nothing ever serious. They got along quite well in school, all of them, and they all graduated, except Anna. She didn't at the time. She was a little bit more rebellious. But
What's your daily life like today compared to what it was like when you were raising your children?
I live alone now in the big house, but it doesn't bother me much because I really sort of enjoy being alone. So that I read a lot and watch things on TV, and I don't have to worry about money like I did back then, because my husband left me, you know, so that I don't have to think about money. So I have my own car, I can still drive, and I go get my own groceries, do my own work, such as it is. I don't do any more than I have to, but it is lonesome by times, of course, because I do miss them, but most of them come every other weekend, or, you know, they all live still in the province, so I get to see them a lot, and I have 10 grandchildren, so I see most of them a lot, although 2 of the girls, Anna's 2, are out in Calgary now, and so I don't see them very much anymore, but I'm in contact with them all the time, and they're good girls, and they're doing really well out there. You know, I do miss them though, but anyhow, other than that, I don't know what I can say. I use the library a lot, as they know, and I get by quite well. Quite well. My health isn't too bad so far, so thankfully. I'll stay that way for a while. Don't know how long.
Miss Belyea, we, the Cambridge Narrows Community School, would like to thank you for sharing your life experiences with us. We hope you enjoyed the experience as much as we did. Thank you once again for your time.
Thank you.
That concludes our interview with Miss Marion Belyea, Cambridge Narrows, New Brunswick, Canada. This is Jamie and Carrie. Thank you for this opportunity, a Legacy of History project.